Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new video. The DOJ has just responded to Judge James Boasberg's response, uh, um, or statement of contempt proceedings. Let's get into this new reporting and what it all entails and break it down in today's legal breaking reporting by Newsweek. The article, ladies and gentlemen, is titled DOJ Responds After Judge Boasberg, BOASBERG, issues criminal contempt warning. Ladies and gentlemen, and the article reads, United States Attorney General Pam Bondi filed an emergency appeal Friday for a stay or court-ordered pause on any criminal contempt of court proceedings for willfully disobeying Judge James Boasberg's BOASBERG''s order to turn back plans carrying deportees to El Salvador. On Friday night, a D.C. Circuit Court halted Judge Boasberg's, that's BOASBERG''s plan for criminal-related proceedings, criminal contempt-related proceedings against the Trump administration in the case involving deportations of Venezuelans to an El Salvador prison. The district court judge wrote, quote, "The purpose of this administrative stay is to give the court sufficient opportunity to consider the emergency motion for a stay pending appeal or a writ of mandamus, and should not be construed in any way as a ruling on the merits of that motion." Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to tell you why it matters. Why it matters, ladies and gentlemen, is that Boasberg, BOASBERG, was appointed as an associate judge on the Superior Court of the District of Columbia in 2002 by President George W. Bush, and was later evaluated to his current post by President Barack Obama. Judge Boasberg, BOASBERG, has remained locked in a legal standoff with the Trump administration over its use of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, which President Donald Trump invoked to justify mass deportations, sending many people to a mega prison in El Salvador. The dispute has raised questions about presidential authority and the
extent to which judicial rulings can limit that authority. The Trump administration recently argued that it cannot comply with the court orders that demand any movement of individuals to or from El Salvador, as it infringes on the country's sovereignty, including in the case of Kilmar Abrigo Garcia, a man mistakenly deported from Maryland.
Ladies and gentlemen, what they're doing in the Abrigo Garcia case and the Venezuelan case in general is effectively bullshit, and it's just a bunch of lies. I tell you that it's a bunch of lies because and a bunch of bullshit because U.S. Maryland Senator Chris Venezuelan was successful after 3.5 days of attempting to meet with Kilmar Abrigo Garcia, at meeting with him finally Friday afternoon, or Friday evening, El Salvador's time. Which, I mean, is fine because it's just more evidence and probable cause for Judge James, who is handling Kilmar Abrigo Garcia's case, and evidence for her to add towards deciding whether or not to proceed criminal contempt or civil contempt. Hopefully it's criminal contempt, so that way people can start going to jail. Charges against the Trump administration and Trump's DOJ and Bondi. I'm about to tell you why this reporting matters.
Ladies and gentlemen, why it matters. Or what we need to know, excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, I'm about to tell you what you need to know. What we need to know, ladies and gentlemen, about this is that Boasberg, Boasberg, wrote on Wednesday that he found probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt of court for its use of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act. In his ruling, March 15, 2025 ruling, he ordered the Trump administration to stop and to return those planeloads of who were on flights out of the country. However, the Trump administration officials claimed the planes had landed before his ruling took effect. Boasberg, Boasberg, then ordered the Trump administration to provide clear details about the timeline of the deportation operations, including the exact times the planes took off, left the airspace, whether they landed in other countries before their final destinations, and the time of their final arrival. The administration has insisted that it did not violate the order, but matters took a turn after the Supreme Court ruled that individuals targeted under the Alien Enemies Act have the right to a hearing in federal court before being removed. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, the Trump administration is effectively lying about all of this. They did not seemingly comply with the judge's orders, which is just probable cause to hold them in contempt. Boasberg, Boasberg, then wrote that the Trump administration's, quote, actions on that day demonstrate a willful disregard of its order. Ladies and gentlemen, its order being the district courts sufficient to the court to conclude, for the court to conclude that probable cause exists to find the government being the Trump administration in the United States government, in criminal contempt. In a 27-page appeal, Bondi wrote and filed with the with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. She said, quote, the district court cannot constitutionally compel its executive branch to compel the executive branch to prosecute itself or transfer its prosecutorial powers, unquote.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pam Bondi is in a sense wrong, but right. Chief Justice Boasberg can, however, appoint a private prosecutor if the Justice Department does not want to prosecute the case to pursue criminal contempt charges. Quote, the district court issued an order to show cause regarding compliance with the TRO's temporary restraining order and held a hearing on April 3, Bondi wrote, quote, unquote. Quote, as the government explained, it had fully complied with the TROs by not removing the named plaintiffs and not removing any other class member from the United States territory after the second TRO issued, unquote. That is effectively bullshit and a flat-out lie, ladies and gentlemen. They did not comply, they being Pam Bondi and the Trump administration and the DOJ. They did not comply whatsoever. They don't like complying, which is okay. It's, on the federal district court's end, that's just means that there's probable cause for them to hold Bondi, Trump, the government, and the Trump regime and the U.S. government in contempt of court, or criminal contempt of court. Bondi repeated the administration's dilemma of attempting to force the president to persuade or force a foreign sovereign, to accede to the court's demand, unquote, claiming that the order, quote, unconstitutionally, unquote, seeks to compel this action, arguing the court's orders, quote, function like injunctions and are appealable as such, unquote. Quote, worse, the district court is putting the executive branch to these unconstitutional choices to cure a non-existent case of criminal contempt, unquote, Bondi said. That is a bullshit lie of Pam Bondi's statements. There's nothing unconstitutional about criminal contempt, especially because that's effectively what the Trump administration, Trump regime, and the U.S. government is currently doing illegally. Quote, defendants fully complied with the TROs the district court issued and and certainly did not flout any clear, unambiguous command, unquote. Again, that is a flat-out fucking lie. The Trump administration did flout the order, and this is why they are headed for criminal contempt, meaning that somebody's going to jail. Continuing with the article. Bondi argued that this amounted to an order of, quote, one of two actions, unquote, either asserting, quote, custody, unquote, over an individual already in foreign sovereign custody, or aid the court in efforts to, quote, effectuate a contempt prosecution, unquote. And that the order would force the executive branch to, quote, prosecute itself, unquote, which would potentially violate separation of powers. Quote, the court instructed the government to investigate and identify senior officials responsible for decision-making with respect to the AEA removals, then prosecute them for purportedly disobeying the court's TRO, unquote, Bondi wrote. Now, that statement is true, but they have to do what the federal district courts say, because what they're doing is unlawful and illegal and unconstitutional. Quote, recognizing that the Attorney General is unlikely to prosecute a criminal referral, the court indicated its intent to appoint a private attorney to prosecute the criminal contempt charges. That entire process egregiously intrudes on the executive branch's exclusive prosecutorial powers. Unquote. One of Bondi's main arguments focuses on the, quote, ambiguous, unquote, meaning of, quote, remove, unquote, in the original orders, saying that the court has changed its stance of, quote, legal removal, i.e., transferring custody, not physical removal, i.e., removing from United States territory, unquote. Instantly, that such a stance is, quote, legally wrong, unquote. And contempt contempt cannot lie based on a supposed wrong reading of a factually ambiguous order, unquote. Quote, the court should immediately stay the district court's order and prevent further grave encroachments on the separation of powers, unquote, Bondi wrote. That is not why the district court put a stay in place, ladies and gentlemen. Pam Bondi is lying through her teeth. She also appealed to the court to, quote, grant mandamus relief, unquote, meaning effectively the higher court would overrule its junior component and end the proceedings outright. Ladies and gentlemen, what people are saying. The Department of Justice told Newsweek Wednesday, quote, the Supreme Court ruled that Judge Boasberg, B-O-A-S-B-E-R-G, has no right to seize control of the president's authority to conduct foreign policy. He should have never issued his order. His underhanded attempt to remain power over this case is a judicial power grab that the Department of Justice will fight all means necessary, unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, that is effectively a lie. The Justice Department, the Supreme Court did not, they did. The Supreme Court did rule this, but now that the Supreme Court effectively, as of earlier yesterday evening, the time that this video is being recorded, technically today on the East Coast, earlier this morning, late last night, technically, it gives the Supreme Court ruling gives Judge Boasberg clearance to pursue contempt proceedings, plus this all occurred before the Supreme Court. So Pam Bondi needs to shut her mouth and stay the hell out of it. Former federal attorney Joyce Vance wrote on Wednesday, quote, "There are a lot of twists and turns. The government is unlikely to agree to prosecute the contempt, but it is almost certain to delay announcing a decision for as long as possible, unless Trump demands it, in order to keep other proceedings from beginning." It's an interesting question who exactly the judge would hold in contempt, ? Quote, "It's not clear who gave the order that kept the planes in the air after the judge ordered they be turned around. If the government is smart, it will cure the contempt to avoid that inquiry." Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to tell you what happens next. Ladies and gentlemen, what happens next is the appellate court will issue its ruling, which will determine whether the contempt hearing proceeds or is ended immediately. The fight could continue up to the Supreme Court, where the justices would then weigh in on a delineation of judicial versus executive powers and the limits therein. Updated 4/18/2025, 1:41 p.m. Eastern Time. This article was updated with additional information. Update 4/18/2025, 7:44 p.m. This article was updated with additional information. Well, ladies and gentlemen, looks like that's going to do it for today's legal breaking reporting and legal analysis video. If you did enjoy this legal breaking analysis video, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. If you would like to make sure you never miss a brand new legal breaking reporting and legal breaking analysis update, please consider following me on my social medias down below. I'm on Instagram, Snapchat, Threads, as well as TikTok. There, you guys will be updated on when I've uploaded a brand new legal breaking reporting and legal breaking analysis video. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, please help me reach and achieve the goal of 160 plus subscribers. The reason why I'm saying 160 plus subscribers is because right after we reach and achieve the goal of 160 subscribers, we have more subscribers to reach and achieve right after we achieve and reach the goal of 160 subscribers. Next, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this video, please stay positive, please stay safe, and until my next legal breaking reporting and legal breaking analysis video, please stay safe, and please stay positive, and know that justice will prevail despite Donald Trump and his illegal regime and administration's illegal, unconstitutional, lawlessness, and executive orders and actions that are all unconstitutional.